Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're basically putting on our anthropologist hats to dig into something seriously fascinating. We are looking at a document from 2013 written by a figure named Su Feng. It lays out the incredibly strict ideological foundations of a real-world utopian experiment known as the second home. Our goal today isn't to judge or take sides, but just to neutrally unpack the nuts and bolts of this society exactly as it's presented in the text and see how this highly unusual community actually operates.
So, let me start by asking you a pretty personal question. Could you live in a society with no marriage, absolutely no money, and zero leaders? Imagine just completely giving up your private property, waving goodbye to the traditional family structure, and erasing your job title and social status forever. Well, believe it or not, that is the absolute baseline requirement for entering the world we're exploring today.
To figure out how this community tries to rebuild the human experience from the ground up, we're going to explore 6 main themes: the modern utopian dream, rethinking work and property, abolishing the nuclear family, equality without leaders, the rule of constant change, and finally, we'll ask, is this actually a blueprint for humanity?
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the modern utopian dream, subtitled Over 2,000 Years in the Making.
Now, before we get lost in all the heavy philosophy, we really need to anchor ourselves in reality here. At the time this manifesto was published back in 2013, the second home wasn't just some pipe dream. No, it had already been a fully operating, active experiment for 4 years. This text is literally a progress report on a living community that claimed to have hit a stable and harmonious phase. And the founder cites a wildly diverse and honestly kinda contradictory range of inspirations. The text actually claims to blend global religious figures, like Jesus, Buddha, and the Prophet Muhammad, with ancient philosophers like Lao Tzu and Plato. And then it takes those spiritual roots and just aggressively mashes them up with historical communist ideology from Marx and Mao, plus classic utopian socialists. It's like a giant philosophical melting pot. The author frames the second home not as a brand new idea, but as the ultimate successful crystallization of literally every utopian dream humanity has ever had.
Okay, moving right along to Section 2, Rethinking Work and Property, where they focus on abolishing the private sphere.
Think about traditional society for a second. Your life is probably pretty defined by accumulating private property, managing your personal wealth, and, carrying the heavy burden of your own financial security. But in the second home, the source material is totally uncompromising. You have absolutely nothing to call your own. Personal belongings? Gone. Money? Completely abolished. Everything belongs to the collective. But, and here's the trade-off, in return, the text promises that every single one of your basic needs will be entirely met by the community. No extravagance, sure, but no scarcity either.
So, that naturally brings up the question of labor. If you're not getting a paycheck, why work at all, right? Well, the text emphasizes that they don't force uniformity. It simply says, as long as each member puts in their best effort every day and does the work they are capable of, it is enough. That's it. No crazy quotas designed to break you. It relies entirely on the honor system. The idea is that if everyone just puts in their best effort, doing what comes naturally to them, the community's needs are automatically met, without all the stress we normally associate with resource allocation. Next up is Section 3, Abolishing the Nuclear Family. This is where the text outlines what is arguably the community's most jarring departure from modern societal norms.
Now, I really want you to take a second and process this quote from the founder. Marriage and families are the breeding grounds for selfishness. Wow. In the ideology of the second home, the traditional family unit isn't seen as this beautiful source of love and support. Nope. It's viewed as a fundamentally flawed system. To them, it's a mechanism that hoards resources, causes painful interpersonal drama, and pulls your loyalty away from the greater collective. Because of this view, marriage and traditional families are strictly, and I mean completely, abolished within the community.
But wait, if you get rid of the family, who takes care of the vulnerable people? Well, the community itself steps up to provide comprehensive cradle-to-grave care. According to the document, kids are raised and educated entirely by the collective. And when you get old, the community takes full responsibility for elder care. The ultimate goal here is total freedom from worry. Parents don't have to stress about providing for their kids' futures, and kids are totally freed from the burden of caring for aging parents later on. The community essentially just replaces the family tree.
Let's move to Section 4, Equality without leaders, and discover how a society without money or family actually governs itself on a day-to-day basis.
So how on earth do you manage a community of this scale without anyone being in charge? The founders use this paradoxical but honestly kind of fascinating concept they call holographic management. Basically, they believe the absolute highest form of management is, well, non-management. Zero offices, zero managers, zero chain of command. Instead, operations are supposed to organically follow the principles of nature. The text insists that in this model, literally every single person is an equal manager and an equal master of the community.
In practice, the text paints a very clear picture of what this equality looks like. The absolute second you walk into the second home, your past is totally erased. It doesn't matter if you were a high-ranking official or a commoner, a PhD scholar or completely illiterate, rich, poor, male, female, every single demographic and historical divider is just stripped away. You become an absolutely equal laborer in the present moment, judged only by your current contributions.
But to maintain this super strict and probably quite fragile equality, they have to stamp out absolutely anything that might create factions. And that means a hard, explicit ban on all political activities and all religious rituals. Which is kind of wild, right? Considering they cited figures like Jesus and Buddha as inspirations. But yeah, no idol worship, no holiday celebrations, and no ceremonies with political or religious connotations. Everything has to neutrally adhere to what they call the way of nature.
All right, transitioning to Section 5, the rule of constant change, which explores the really unusual daily mechanics of the community.
If you are someone who likes a predictable daily routine, the second home is the exact opposite. Operating on what they call the principle of least resistance, the community artificially enforces relentless, constant change. I'm talking your house gets relocated frequently, your work shifts are routinely swapped around, and your social groups are constantly shuffled. The text explicitly states that this system makes it physically impossible for any two people to stay together for an extended period. You are perpetually forced into a novel environment.
So, why? Why put people through all that deliberate disruption? Well, the intended psychological effect is twofold. First, by completely destroying stability and routine, they think they're preventing human stagnation, or what they call the maximization of entropy. It's designed to make sure internal cliques or warlordism never form. But on the flip side, they argue this endless change actually stimulates your brain, keeps life from getting boring, and provides the friction needed to eventually forge a truly harmonious global family.
And that brings us to our final section, a blueprint for humanity. Let's take a look at the ultimate endgame of these incredibly strict communal rules.
Beyond those core characteristics, daily life here is packed with highly specific social guardrails. Get this, you can't celebrate birthdays. One-on-one romantic relationships are strictly avoided, so you don't form exclusive bonds. There is a total, absolute ban on complaining or sharing grievances to keep community morale up. Plus, absolute transparency, zero privacy or secretive practices allowed. The text claims all of this is carefully engineered to maintain an idyllic ecological environment where everyone is theoretically happy, joyful, free, and blessed.
The author of this 2013 document genuinely promises that tearing down society like this is the secret to elevating human life to celestial realms. But it really challenges us to step back and genuinely ask, does stripping away your private property, your traditional family structure, and your personal status actually lead to true human freedom? Or is this strict to ever-shifting communal living just a different kind of cage? It's a completely fascinating look at the lengths a group will go to build their specific flavor of utopia and what they're willing to trade to get there. Thank you so much for joining us on this explainer.